This podcast was developed by the Maryland Restorative Approaches Collaborative, a partnership between the Maryland State Department of Education and the Center for Dispute Resolution at the University of Maryland Francis King Carey School of Law to support restorative approaches across Maryland. This podcast series, Restorative Approaches, Our Stories, Our Voices, is hosted by Robin McNair. All of the podcasts are available on CDRUM's Restorative Approaches Resources website.
In this episode, Robin interviews Dawana Nicole, Executive Director of Restorative Justice Partnership. They talk about how restorative communities heal the pernicious effects of zero-tolerance discipline, especially on students of color, by building true relationships and community in schools and families.
Hello, 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 and welcome to episode 4 of CDRUM's Restorative Approaches, Our Stories, Our Voices. I am your host, Robin McNair, and it is an honor to have our third guest, Miss Dawana Nicole, joining us today. How are you today, Dawana?
I'm great, Robin. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. So let me share just a little bit about Miss Nicole. Ms. Dawana Nicole is the Executive Director of the Restorative Justice Partnership, where she works within school communities throughout the country to assist them with developing strategies to create more positive school climates for students, educators, and families. By using a collaborative model that includes stakeholders at every level, from the students all the way to the school board members, she provides training and support in the implementation of restorative justice in schools through the creation of individualized, short and long-term implementation plans, resource development, complementary professional learning, and on-site assistance. All right, so there are some other things in this amazing bio that lets us know what Miss Dawana Nicole has done before she begins serving as an executive director, but I'm going to allow her to share her story with her voice. So Dawana, I would like for you to share with us your restorative journey.
Well, thank you again for having me, Robin. So I'd say my restorative journey really began when I was at a civil rights organization called Advancement Project. I had been working in education for quite some time, for almost 2 decades at that point, both within and outside of systems. But it was one of my first duties at Advancement Project was to moderate a panel. The particular kind of project that I was working on there was around dismantling the school to prison pipeline. And this was a conference that the organization was having for really youth and family organizers across the country who were, we were starting to finally see wins around changing code of conduct, and folks finally acknowledging that exclusionary discipline was not working. And I happened to moderate a panel on alternatives at the time. Restorative justice was very much talked about as the alternative to exclusionary discipline. And so I had the pleasure of moderating this panel with a few practitioners from across the country. And it was really after that panel that one of them in particular, Mr. Robert Spicer, really encouraged me to learn more, to do more, that if this was something that I was going to talk about and teach about, then I needed to learn about it myself. And that was that. From there, went to several trainings, got connected to some of the stalwarts in this work when it comes to restorative justice, and had the opportunity to really just sit alongside them and learn for many years. And then we at Advancement Project, we were starting to see educators really come around and ask more questions about what this work looked like, what did it look like in school, what did a school who implemented restorative justice feel like? And from there, we were just able to, that opened lots of doors in terms of getting to know people who had been doing this work for decades, like, 20 years, 30 years, and learning from them, both practitioners and educators who were beneficiaries of the work, in school settings where, this work had really taken hold and something beautiful was happening. And we just really took those learnings and shared them with other people. So, everything that we produce is something that, we have also learned ourselves, that I learned myself through my own journey, and wanting, to share that knowledge and information just like it was shared with me.
Wow, quite a journey, quite a journey. Something you said that stuck out with me was that you work with families and you also worked with school systems, kind of examining their student codes of conduct at the very beginning. Can you kind of share a little bit about what you found in the student codes of conduct that did not align with, some of the changes that were starting to take hold in our nation as it pertains to the school to prison pipeline?
Sure. So what we immediately saw a lot of times before we started to see codes of conduct change were really zero tolerance policies. And so this is the infraction and this is the response, really the punishment, right? There's no consideration for what was going on, what may have been happening with the young person, what the adult may have done to maybe push their buttons themselves. The age of the young person, just really no room at all to even have a conversation. It was just kind of like an automatic punishment. And that's the thing that we've seen like most school districts move away from, is like zero tolerance policy. But we also saw a lot of other things. A lot of policies and practices that were in place that even if they weren't written in a way that was discriminatory against students of color, it certainly had a discriminatory effect. And so dress code policies, for example, or in many codes of conduct at the time, there would be things around like hair even, right? And like making sure your hair is neat. And as someone with natural hair myself, right, I would also often question what that actually meant, like to have neat hair, right? Or, policies around hats or hoods that we knew really affected young people of color more than other students. And so we would also encourage school districts to really move away from, to really examine data, right? And if your policy was having an effect on mostly students of color, then that was something that you needed to look over. And there were lots of times, again, where policies are race neutral, but it's having like a racist effect. I think the other thing that we saw was suspensions and expulsions for attendance. So a child's not coming to school, so they get punished for not coming to school by being sent away from school, or suspensions and expulsions for disrespect, disruption, insubordination, very subjective infractions that don't really have like a meaning from person to person. So it's actually difficult for someone to even figure out what respect means in one place versus another. And it really is a very personal thing too, right? So I personally feel disrespected, and then I have the power to punish you. And so that's been another area where we have seen school districts move away from out of school suspensions for some of those subjective infractions. And some of that still certainly exists to this day in many places. It's still something that we're trying to call attention to, but there has been a lot of movement on the ground across the country, really thanks to the organizing efforts of young people and their families.
Wow, that is amazing. And just listening to you talk about how some of those policies, without saying it, affected certain populations of young people, specifically Black and Brown students. So thank you for sharing that. It's something else that you shared that I wanted you to speak about, because I know the work that you do really deals with implementing a whole school approach to using restorative justice practices in schools. And you talked about alternatives. And when you first started working with restorative justice, school systems were looking at it as an alternative to something. So, can you share with me now how your work shifted from looking at restorative justice as an alternative to quote unquote punishment to what you are actually doing now, and how you've seen that impact, or as you say, it has become something beautiful.
Sure. So I remember being at a conference and listening to a young person talking about restorative justice. And one of the things he said was, sometimes there's nothing to restore to. And I think when this work really, the way educators were looking at this work a number of years ago was, and I think in some cases still is, very much instead of suspend, we do this. Instead of suspend, we sit in circle. Instead of suspend, we have a conversation. Instead of suspend, we do something else. Without the acknowledgement that the relationship still doesn't exist. And so that question around like, what are we restoring to, really let me know that this work is actually about community building. And we can only really think about harm when the community is present, when the community has been built, where the community is strong. And I think in schools, this is, if you ask a lot of educators, sometimes, many will say that they have good relationships, right, with their young people, with the young people in the building. Young people may not feel the same way. And we're talking about deep relationships, more than just, noticing like you have on different shoes today, or that you're wearing a new outfit, or we know your favorite ice cream flavor. We're talking about, in one of the schools that I'm working with, this young person tells a story. I hope it's okay for me to share this, around how there was a fire in his neighborhood. And he received a message on Canvas, the way that teachers communicate with young people, asking him if he was okay. Because this teacher, who wasn't his current teacher, remembered that he lived in this neighborhood and was checking on him. And the young person was saying how, that was something that had never occurred to him before. A teacher had never checked in on him or cared about him at that level, to one, know where he lives, to check on him when, there's a fire in his neighborhood, not at his home, to make sure he's okay and if he has everything that he needs. And so those are the relationships that we're talking about, making sure that young people have a person in the building. And I think we ask that of young people, to be able to like build these relationships with one another. But what I've also learned is this work actually starts with the adults, that the young people are often fine.
Mhm.
And how are we modeling what being in good relationship with one another looks like? Are we in good relationship with our colleagues? And so that foundation of community building actually starts with the adults in the building, because if we see restorative justice as a school climate and culture shift, and research tells us that the school climate and culture is really created by the adults in the building, not the students are often responding to what they see. How are we actually modeling what it means to be in good relationship with one another, with our peers and our colleagues, so young people see that and then doing the same for them? And so instead of this idea of restorative justice as the alternative to something horrible,
Mhm.
what I, encourage people to ask is, what type of school community do you want to have? And restorative justice is the way to get there. So restorative justice is, how do we not even have to rely on these awful things that are occurring, that we're doing to our young people, and not just right within this education system, but like suspenders and expulsion, school-based arrests, right? These are things that have an effect on their life, their entire life, outside of their K through 12 education. And so really being mindful of creating spaces where, that is not our go-to, where we're actually getting to know one another, where if something happens, we're acknowledging, one, that harm happens in spaces where adults and human beings are present.
Right.
And when something happens, we're going to come together as a community and fix it, because we care about every single person in this community. And I think, we don't always like to talk about that, but those are some of the things that are missing. Like, do we actually care about all people in our community? Do we actually believe that there is inherent wisdom in every single member of our school community? Do we really believe that all young people can succeed at high levels? Do we have any biases and assumptions, right? These biases and assumptions actually get in the way of our thinking that, each and every person of our school community is and should be valued. And so if this is the type of environment that we want to go to work in, that we want our young people to be in, that our families want to send our young people to, then restorative justice is the way to kind of shift what we have been doing in education and create something new.
Wow. I keep saying the word wow, because I just listening to you just really pierces my heart, because I know this work is so dear to my heart. But when I hear you say that, the self-reflection piece and really asking those questions about what do we believe, and not even what do we believe about our young people. My thought was, Robin, what do you believe about, the staff in your building? What do you believe about the educators in your building? Because you said, Duana, that it really starts with us and making sure we're in good relationship with one another as adults, so young people can, see that, because we know they're always watching, aren't they?
They
Oh,
are always watching.
yes.
Always.
Yeah.
They know more than we do.
Yes, they do. And we got to remember that they have this inherent wisdom that we need to tap into. And I know that's something that you really stress about student voice and listening to their life experiences. So, as a wrap up question, I wanted to just ask you if you could just share quickly about how has restorative justice impacted, because you did use that word, um, your life on a personal level. When we talk about deep relationships, does it stop in the school, or does it move into our home? And if it does, can you share your impact?
Yes, and right on cue, my daughter may walk in. Um, so I would say where restorative justice shows up most is in my personal life. I am a better friend, a better partner, a better sister, a better auntie, but most importantly, I'm a much better mother. I didn't have a child before I started this work, but I know that this work has allowed me to be a better mother than I would have been if I did not have it. I have a toddler who has really strong leadership skills and is all the things that I would love her to be like as an adult, as most toddlers are, right? She speaks her mind. When
Mhm.
something isn't right, she tells me. When she doesn't want to do something, she tells me. She has no problem saying no. She is sweet and kind and loving. But like, toddler, she's also impatient sometimes. But that's a way of advocating for what you want. And I have had to learn that even at 3, even at 2, right? Like she has a voice that I must respect. And
Mm.
that every single thing that I do is either preparing her to be able to use her voice as she gets older, or it's stifling her voice, which will continue as she gets older. And so I'm really trying to lean into like she has agency, right? There are decisions that she can make that I don't have to force her to do. Um, there are, when she says no, I respect her no. Obviously, bedtime is a different thing, but like, if she doesn't want to eat a certain thing or she's not hungry at this moment, we're not going to force the child to eat, right? If she doesn't want to go to the park or go outside, we can do something else. There are options, there are choices. And that's really also caused me to be more patient, to not kind of prioritize. How do I make sure that I'm prioritizing her needs over mine? And not that I'm going without, or not that I'm not taking care of myself, but I think, about like how I was raised and, not choosing the easier route because it's easier for me if it doesn't like meet her needs. Like how am I holding both of those at the same time? um but I think mostly it's just the joy in, I think, seeing like little people um express the fullness of themselves and having no problem doing that, and also sitting with the knowledge that at some point, it's school that does this, right? But I say at some point, even though I know the point that it occurs, at some point, this is going to be, people are going to try to take this away. The things that I see and love the most about her that we encourage at home are things that are not going to be welcomed and supported in the school environment, which only indicates to me that I need to work extra hard at home to make sure that she really grows into a person who knows the power of words and doesn't hold back and speaks her mind and fights for what's right. And I think, how do I also model that, right? Wanting her to be proud of me and the work that I do, all really matters to me. And so I think before I was a mother, I was an auntie. And I did start this work when my niece was very little. And I just remember like some of the earlier conversations my brother and I would have were about like the question that little children ask you all the time, why? And sometimes like our go-to answer as adults is because I said so, or
Right.
to stop the why, because we think that they're being disrespectful or just asking. And it was in some of those moments that I actually realized, no, they're actually asking why, because that's how they're learning,
Mhm.
right? They're asking because they don't know. And a simple because I said so is not an answer to that question. And if I want you to tie your shoe and you ask me why, then I should explain to you why it's important for your shoes to be tied, because I don't want you to trip and hurt yourself. And if you ask me again, I can explain it again. And that there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. That's not a sign of disrespect. And that's not a sign of kind of wasting time. It is really a way that children learn. And so it's really forced me to like be more patient with everyone around me, but especially children and especially my own child. Because just like all work, right? The people closest to you know what your triggers are. They know how to push you,
Mm.
right? And then these are also the relationships that you hold dearest, that take the most work because you do love them so much. But it's, I also know I've seen like how this work benefits children, obviously, in my professional life. And, wanting that same thing for my own child is really important.
Yeah, that's very, very important. And I cannot wait to see how she will be showing her leadership skills as she goes through her grade school years and then into middle school and high school, because I can definitely see her being an amazing leader because she's getting that opportunity now to really practice her leadership skills, even as a small child. So thank you
Yeah.
for sharing that story with us
Can I
today.
also add one thing? I think that
Absolutely.
the way I think this has benefited her the most is there is a community of people who that she is a part of. One of my mentors, Rita Richardson Alfred out of Oakland, California, tells the story of how when she was a child, um, kind of, letting go of her father's hand for a minute and, grabbing a hand, thinking it was her father, um, and, walking and holding that hand, right? As
Mhm,
she's walking. And at some point she looks up, it is not her father, it's someone
mhm,
else. And so she searches for her father and she sees him close by and he kind of gives her this look and a smile to let her know that it's okay. And I think about my own child and the way I've seen her do this, be in a group of, 6 or 7 people and walk from person to person and holding their hand. And, we may have some issues with stranger danger down the line, but at this moment in her life, everyone is family. And there have been many hands that have taken care of her, not just mine and my partners or her family members, including you, Robin. There have been many hands that have watched over her, that have fed her, that have held her, that have rocked her to sleep. And I think because she is part of such a strong community, she also feels that love as well. And I think when I think about the love that she shows, a lot of it comes from that too.
Community, community. Yes, that's so evident. And as you share that story, that's exactly what I'm hearing from you. Awesome. Well, once again, folks, that's our time. Thank you so much for spending your precious time with me on C Drums, Restorative Approaches, our stories, our voices, and listening to the amazing journey of Miss Dewana Nicole of Restorative Justice Partnership. So until next time, once again, Dwana, thank you.
Thank you, Robin.
And everyone, be well.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. This podcast, copyright 2023, by the Center for Dispute Resolution at the University of Maryland Carey School of Law, is licensed for sharing under the Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives license. For more information about the Creative Commons license, please visit creativecommons.org. All of the podcasts in this series are available on our Restorative Approaches Resources website, cdrum.org.